For 6 years, my boyfriend has avoided marriage, insisting that our different backgrounds are the issue. But deep down, I know it's really because he can't accept that I earn more than him. Hey everyone, great to have you back. I've got a fresh story for you today, so let's jump right in. I'm 30 years old and came to the US from Thailand 6 years ago to pursue my graduate studies. I met my boyfriend, Noah, just a few months after moving here, and we've been inseparable ever since. He's a US citizen. After I graduated, we had a serious conversation about the direction of our relationship. One evening, we sat down, and though there was tension in the air, I felt a sense of hope. I made it clear that marriage and having kids were things I wanted in the future. I needed to know we were on the same page about where this was all going. He agreed with me, saying he wanted the same things. I remember asking him straight up if he saw himself marrying me because I didn't want to be stuck in a relationship without a future. He looked me right in the eyes, told me he loved me, and assured me that we were definitely headed in that direction. His words made me feel secure, and I believed that we were aligned. As of last week, we've been together for 6 years. We'd occasionally touched on the subject of marriage, usually during those quiet, easy moments on lazy Sundays or when we'd share a bottle of wine on special evenings. But with both of us being so focused on our careers, the right moment never seemed to come for us to take the next step. He was busy with his teaching, and I was deeply involved in my role at a tech company. Our work kept us both pretty occupied. Then recently, my company announced that my department might be outsourced, which really shook me up. As someone on an H-1B visa, that meant I needed to start looking for a new job if I wanted to stay in the US. The uncertainty about my job made everything feel even more stressful. I knew I had to act quickly. Losing my job would mean losing my ability to stay in this country, which has become my second home over the past 6 years. So, last week, during our anniversary dinner, I brought it up. We were having dinner at our favorite spot, celebrating 6 years together. The atmosphere was perfect, soft lighting, a quiet corner table where we could talk openly. As we ate, I gathered the courage to ask him if he thought it was the right time for us to start thinking about marriage, especially since it could help with my visa situation. I tried to present it as a practical solution, combining our love and future with the reality of my situation. But his reaction was nothing like I expected. His face went pale, and he looked like he was about to be sick. He avoided my gaze, staring down at his plate. After a lot of hesitation, he finally admitted that he wasn't planning on marrying me until I got my green card, a permanent resident status in the US. His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I was so confused and hurt. He had never mentioned this before. What was supposed to be a celebration of our love turned into a painful conversation, leaving me to question everything. I just couldn't understand why he had never brought this up before. He said he didn't want to be used as a visa mule, his words, not mine. He explained that he wanted to be sure I was marrying him because I loved him, not because it was a way for me to stay in the US, something that would only happen once I got my green card. Hearing him say that felt like a slap in the face. It was as if he was questioning my love and my intentions, even after everything we'd been through together. It took me a while to process everything he'd said. I sat there, shocked, trying to make sense of his sudden admission. The man who had always been my rock now seemed like a stranger, one who was questioning the very foundation of our relationship. Desperate for clarity, I asked him if he'd be willing to move to Thailand with me if things didn't work out with my visa. His quick refusal hurt even more. He made it clear that he wasn't interested in moving anywhere, showing just how different our priorities had become. I didn't take it well. The mix of betrayal, confusion, and hurt was too much to handle. I could feel my eyes welling up with tears, and I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I stood up abruptly, muttered something about needing air, and left the restaurant. I couldn't deal with what had just happened. The evening, meant to celebrate our anniversary, had turned into a nightmare, leaving me questioning everything about our future. I'm still in disbelief. When I first started dating him, he was the kindest, most thoughtful, and generous man I'd ever met. From day one, he was always there for me, helping me adjust to life in a new country, supporting me through grad school, and just being a loving, caring partner. He made me feel valued, cherished, and loved, and I truly believed we shared something deep and real. But now, it feels like I wasted 6 years. The realization that he had been doubting my intentions all along is absolutely crushing. Sure, the visa situation is stressful, but I never dated him with the idea of using him as a safety net. I loved him for who he was, not for what he could offer in terms of legal status. The fact that he even suspects otherwise cuts deep. It's painful to think that after all these years, he sees me as someone who might take advantage of him just to stay in the country. I can't wrap my head around it. After nearly a decade together, how does he not know the kind of person I am? I've always been independent, hardworking, and never once relied on him financially or in any other way. I thought he valued and appreciated that about me. But knowing he has these doubts makes me question everything about our relationship. It's a heartbreaking realization. Despite all the love, all the time we've spent together, he never really understood me. He never truly saw my character or my intentions. And now, I can't shake the feeling that this relationship might be over. And it hurts. It hurts more than I can put into words. Update. A few days ago, I shared how my boyfriend of 6 years refused to marry me because I'm on an H-1B visa and he didn't want to be a visa mule. For context, I've had my H-1B for a little over 2 years now. Before that, I was on STEM OPT for about 3 years after finishing grad school. Navigating the visa process has been nothing short of exhausting. I had terrible luck with the H-1B lottery. Every year, I applied, hoping for the best, only to be met with the crushing disappointment of not being selected. As my eligibility window narrowed, the anxiety kept growing. Finally, in my very last year of eligibility, I got it. The relief I felt in that moment was indescribable. But the entire experience left me constantly aware of just how fragile my situation was. Keeping my visa meant keeping my job, and any disruption could mean losing everything I had built here. Getting permanent residency in the US is no easy feat. I know people who've been here for over 10 years and are still waiting for their green cards. It's a long, uncertain process. For those of you who messaged me calling me a gold digger, congratulations, you made me laugh. I understand the legal aspects of spousal sponsorship, including the financial commitment involved. But let's be clear, it never should have been a problem. I work in STEM and recently transitioned into management. Over the years, I've climbed the ranks through dedication and hard work, eventually landing a leadership position. I manage a team at a large company, overseeing major projects. My career has been rewarding, both professionally and financially. I do quite well for myself, making close to $275,000 a year. My boyfriend, on the other hand, is a passionate teacher. He loves what he does and makes a meaningful impact on his students. But financially, our incomes aren't even close. He earns about $75,000 a year, a respectable salary, but significantly less than mine. That has never mattered to me. I've always admired his dedication to education and the difference he makes in people's lives. Our different career paths never affected my feelings for him or my commitment to our relationship. For the past 5 years, we've lived together. We have a shared account where we each deposit a percentage of our income to cover rent and utilities, and the rest stays in our own separate accounts. We don't manage each other's money. I'm pretty frugal by nature, so over the years, I've saved a good amount through careful planning and investments. I've always been mindful of the future, and that financial discipline has paid off. I have a solid financial cushion. If he was genuinely concerned about the legal and financial responsibilities of sponsoring me, we could have had that conversation. I would have been more than willing to move my savings around to reassure him. In fact, I was even thinking about buying a house. Had we moved forward, I would have made it a joint ownership, further proving my commitment to building a future together. There were so many ways we could have worked through this. There were solutions, practical, realistic ones, that would have made sure we were both secure. I've never relied on him financially, and I wasn't planning to start. I've always been self-sufficient, capable of handling my own finances, and that wouldn't have changed in marriage. My financial stability was never in question. If there were concerns, I was open to figuring it out together. Maybe I didn't think of every single possibility, but the truth is, the idea of marriage as a solution to my visa only crossed my mind recently, when it became clear that my job security was at risk. Up until then, it had never been a significant factor in my plans. My priority had always been our relationship, building a life together based on love, trust, and mutual respect. It was only when my company announced the possibility of outsourcing that I had to seriously consider what my next steps would be. The sudden threat of losing my ability to stay in the US forced me to think about marriage in a practical way, but it was never about using him. And the fact that he thinks otherwise? That's what hurts the most. The thought of marriage as a solution to my visa issues only crossed my mind in a moment of desperation, when I was staring down the possibility of my entire life and career being uprooted. It was never part of my plan from the start. As for my situation back home, returning to Thailand isn't an option. I come from a deeply religious and conservative family, and my childhood was anything but happy. They never supported my career choices, and when I moved to the US, I cut ties with them completely. They haven't been a part of my life since. But I had been incredibly close to my boyfriend's family. They embraced me from the start, treating me like one of their own. They loved me. The actual update. He is now my ex-boyfriend. I needed a few days to process everything before I reached out to him. I went through a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, anger, sadness, and, above all, a deep sense of betrayal. I couldn't just react in the heat of the moment. I needed time to really sit with what had happened, to think about what I wanted to say, and to untangle how I truly felt. During those days, I replayed our relationship over and over in my head, trying to make sense of it all. I tried to see things from his perspective, to understand where this doubt had come from. When I finally felt ready, I sent him a message asking if we could meet and talk. He agreed, and we decided to meet at a quiet cafe we used to go to often. Sitting across from him, I could see it in his face. He was struggling too. The exhaustion, the weight of everything we hadn't said before, it was all there in his eyes. The conversation was tense, heavy with emotions, but it had to happen. We needed closure. That's when he admitted something that hit me hard. He had been insecure about our income difference for a long time. For years, he had felt inadequate because I earned so much more than him. His friends had been making jokes, calling me his sugar mommy, laughing about how I took care of most of our expenses. And the worst part? He had let their words get to him. I had no idea. All this time, I thought we were fine, that we were a team. But behind the scenes, he had been carrying this resentment, letting it fester, letting their voices become louder than mine. Instead of telling me, instead of opening up about his struggles, he let his own insecurities push him further away from me. He let himself believe that our relationship wasn't about love, but about convenience. That realization blindsided me. Apparently, the difference in our incomes made him feel like he wasn't my equal. He didn't feel like he was contributing enough, and over time, those feelings built up until he convinced himself that I was only with him for my own gain. I was speechless. His so-called friends had planted these doubts in his head, twisting the truth, making him question everything we had built together. It broke my heart to realize that instead of trusting me, he had listened to them. I reminded him of all the ways he had supported me when I was struggling in grad school. Back then, I had nothing. I was scraping by, trying to make ends meet while juggling my studies. And he was there for me through all of it. I brought up how he used to buy me groceries when money was tight, how every week, without fail, he made sure I had food on the table and never made me feel ashamed about it. I reminded him of how he let me stay in his apartment rent-free during my last year of grad school, knowing I was trying to avoid taking on more debt. He didn't hesitate, he just wanted to help. And then there was his car. I needed to get to job interviews, and he handed me the keys without a second thought, telling me he believed in me. All of these things, all of these moments, he did them because he loved me. So why was it so hard for him to believe that I was doing the same? Since I started working, I had taken on most of the household expenses not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It was my way of paying him back, of balancing the scales, of showing him the same support he once showed me. It was never about making him feel small. Never about making him feel less of a man. It was about us, about being a team, about looking out for each other, about knowing that sometimes one person carries more weight, and that's okay. He sat there, listening, and after a long silence, he admitted, "I get what you're saying. But I never expected you to start earning more than me so quickly." There was frustration in his voice, but also resignation. He understood my point, but that didn't change how he felt. He had always imagined being the primary provider. My success had thrown him off. And no matter how much I reassured him, it didn't erase the deep-rooted beliefs he had about what his role should be. I saw it in his eyes, the pain, the conflict, the weight of his own expectations. I asked him if he'd consider couples therapy, like some of you suggested. I thought that maybe, with the help of a professional, we could work through these deep-rooted insecurities and misunderstandings. Therapy could give us the tools to communicate better, to rebuild the trust that seemed to be slipping through our fingers. But he refused. He was firm in his decision, making it clear that he didn't see himself as the one with the problem. In his mind, he wasn't being unreasonable. He believed that in a relationship, he should be the provider, and no matter how I framed it, he just didn't feel like one with me. My salary, my success, it all made him feel inadequate, overshadowed, and somehow, less of a man. No amount of reassurance could change that for him. And then, he said something that made me realize just how deep this issue ran. He told me there was no way forward unless I quit my job and found something that paid significantly less. I was stunned. His words hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't just struggling with insecurity, he was willing to place an ultimatum on our relationship because of it. He wanted me to undo years of hard work, to give up the financial independence I had spent so much time building, just so he could feel more comfortable in his role. That was never going to happen. Hearing him say that made something click inside me. I realized that this wasn't something I could fix for him. It wasn't a problem we could solve together because he wasn't willing to try. His refusal to even consider therapy, combined with his expectation that I should make myself smaller to accommodate his fears, made it painfully clear that we had reached a point of no return. And that's how, after 6 years, we broke up. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. It was heartbreaking, messy, painful, and filled with tears, regret, and the weight of everything we had built together. It felt like the end of something that had once been so full of love and promise. His family was in shock. They had always supported our relationship, fully expecting that he would propose soon. They couldn't wrap their heads around how quickly everything unraveled. His parents and siblings, who had welcomed me like one of their own, were devastated. They reached out, expressing their disappointment and confusion. Their sadness only made it harder. In the days after the breakup, I couldn't stay in the apartment we had shared. Every room, every piece of furniture, every little thing was a reminder of what we had lost. It was unbearable. So, I packed my things and moved into an Airbnb. It wasn't home, but it was a space where I could breathe, a place to figure out what came next. And then, just when everything felt like it was falling apart, a new opportunity appeared. My company offered me a similar role in a different department, this time in Portugal. When I got the news, it felt like a glimmer of light cutting through all the darkness. There was a slight pay cut, but honestly, that didn't matter. The opportunity itself was something I couldn't pass up. I had always dreamed of living in Europe, of immersing myself in new cultures, of experiencing life in a completely different way. And now, I had a chance to make that dream a reality. So, I accepted the offer. The relocation process has already begun. In the next 4 to 8 weeks, I'll be moving to Portugal, starting over in a place I've always wanted to explore. There's something freeing about it, like hitting the reset button on my life. The transition will be bittersweet, no doubt, but it's also a chance for something new, something better. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm stepping into a future that's completely my own. A new beginning. A fresh start. A new adventure. What do you think of this story? Let me know in the comments below.